This is a situation that Nigerians must address. If we fail to address it, we have handed Nigeria over to strong men and not strong institutions.
So do you think that mandatory electronic transmission is maybe, let's imagine, Mr. Peter Obi's only route to winning the election?
You know, Mr. Kayode, let me be very honest with you, because when we speak sometimes, it may seem like you have a particular interest. I have never met President Tinubu. I have never met most of the persons who are running for presidency. What we are saying is this: let there be elections that are seen to be free, fair, credible, and peaceful. Whoever that emerges from this process should be acceptable to Nigerians. Mr. Kayode, we should not spend billions of naira on a process and then we have a glitch. How can we have a situation when 93 million people register to vote, 87 million collect PVCs, less than 30 million come out to vote? President Tinubu is seated in the villa with less than 9 million votes as a mandate. In what exam does a person write and score less than 50% and is promoted to the next class? We as a people must decide to ask ourselves, what exactly do we want to achieve?
Mr. Peter, you know that is the law.
That is, it is also part of the electoral amendment. Right. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. It is also part of the Electoral Act amendment. You know, because of all of that has been happening, a lot of emphasis have been laid on, this electronic transmission. The bill contains other clauses. Remember the clause that was talked about by Senator Seraki Dixon on moving the burden of proof from the petitioners to INEC. The issue of indirect primaries has also now been, been passed. Indirect primaries have been taken out, handing over more power to the political parties. Nigerians, including media and everybody, must become very concerned about this act. It is not even just the electronic transmission of results, but because we do not pay attention, even issues of the percentage that you should get. Remember how the tribunal or the Supreme Court administered and interpreted the case of if you should have 25% in how many states and Abuja. These are all issues that should be looked into so that the courts or the judiciary do not continue to rule on technicalities. And above all, we do not have a judicialization of our electoral process where we spend billions to conduct a process and then wait for the courts to choose our leaders.
Besaka, it's a continuous struggle, as you say, a luta continua from your end and from everybody who is uncomfortable with the situation. But those who are comfortable, they are excited. So it's a mixed bag of everything. But at the end of the day, I think what all of us want is an election that we can trust the outcome, where if you win, we know you did not mobilize enough, not because you rigged or you cheated or you gamed the system. I think that's the aspiration. Whether we'll get there is still a question of aspiration and hope.
But issued a statement in which you gave empirical evidence that, in fact, without electronic real-time transmission, most of the lawmakers in the National Assembly may not return. And you plotted the turnover rate that we have been having over the years. But do you think that with the decision that has now been taken by the National Assembly, do you think anybody has taken your advice? Do you think that the lawmakers have learned any lessons from what you claim befell their predecessors in that National Assembly? Or are you disappointed in any way?
Thank you, Dr. Abati, Rufai, and Ayo for having me. But I think that before I answer that question, I need to clear something here. And that is that Nigerians have been wondering that for the past 2 years, I have decided to switch off painfully with respect to anything that has to do with our country. And I put my television on Chinese station, not because I hear Chinese, because I have spent over 30 years of my life, 10 practical years in INEC, together with other Nigerians, on how to remove the history of our election from the poetry of frustration and pain, so that we can give meaning and purpose to the ballot as the best means of the expression of the will of the people in a democracy. If after a decade of effort in this direction, we are still back to where we are, and given the fact that when I left office in 2022, I was not part of the 2023 elections, but I was part of those who educated Nigerians. That is why people are holding me accountable. That on this channel, Arise Television, when I left office, the Duke of Delta, Undoka Bagwena, I called him. I called John Momo, Raymond Dokwesi, the TVC, and I said, I have decided that all the requests for consultancy, I turned everything down. That it's unethical, that having worked in a commission, having been part of those who develop the processes, it would be wrong of me to take any appointment from anybody. On this Arise Television, for over 1 year, you never charged me a dime, nor was I paid by INEC or anybody, but for the service of the country. To now find that all that we did are now in vain, that's why I don't regret that I wasted my 10 years in the service of the fatherland.
At this point, it is up to Nigerians to either unite and end the APC reign of terror over Nigeria, or APC will be the end of a democratic Nigeria as we know it. Nigeria has become an open crime scene, and what we call government in Nigeria is literally organized criminality. Every institution that is supposed to serve the welfare of the Nigerian people have become weaponized against them. And most unfortunately, it's a National Assembly and a parliament that should be the hallmark of a democracy has become an extension of the presidency, a captured assembly. So today, if President Tinubu asks Senate and House leadership to jump up, the question will be how high? And there is no end to this trajectory and these unfortunate actions. It is up to Nigeria to say enough of this political banditry. We cannot continue like this. A ruling party who claims to own more than 30 governors, have every institution, the judiciary, the police, township boys, city girls, and everybody, is afraid of one simple clause: mandatory real-time electronic transmission of results, which, by the way, INEC in itself has proven from their feasibility studies that they have the capacity to do. So let us not be ambiguous or unambiguous about this. This is a script being played out by the Senate President Akpabio, written from the presidential villa, and INEC is not neutral. We were at the gates demanding for the implementation of the electronic transmission of results, and before you know it, tear gas canisters were released or whatever substance were released on peaceful protesters. The first batch was released, people scampered and then came back there, and then there was a reinforcement of about a number of Hilux vehicles that carried some officers. The canisters were shot directly at peaceful protesters. In fact, these are some of the canisters that were picked, more than 20 or 30 of them. This was shot at protesters who ran up to the Eagle Square as far as the federal secretariat, even on passerbys who were just passing through the road, who were not part of the protest. And the question will be, who is afraid of free and fair election in Nigeria? What exactly is the ruling party afraid of? INEC has received 200 billion, claiming it wants to use electronic technology. Sir, what kind of technology is INEC trying to adopt and procure with 200 billion? What happened to the technology that was procured by Mahmoud Yakubu with over 300 billion in 2023? Are beavers machines like diapers or pampers that are used and then disposed? There is something and a lot that the ruling party is not telling us. The budget that was approved by INEC is a budget, if not clearly explained to Nigeria, will only aid and sustain electoral malpractices. And that is why, as it is today, it must become a national mobilization against this legitimizing of an electoral act that will guarantee rigging. Why is the Senate President making excuses for INEC? In today's Nigeria, lawmakers are giving reasons or excuses why electronic technology will not work against INEC's own position. The level of mischief. What a shame, and you could see it play out in the chambers. Lawmakers coming out to chant APC only, because in the face of all Nigerians and the world, leadership of the National Assembly are trying to brazenly ensure that they get a law that is going to legitimize electoral malpractice and election rigging. It is a shame, it is a travesty, and Nigerians who mean well for our lives must resist it, because for our lives to count, our votes must count.
All right, so Peter, let's try to envision what will then play out on election day with what has been passed now by the Senate.
Yes.
So the Senate says electronic transmission with manual backup. And what the Senate president said in his words is that when it was time to put it to vote, he said for those who want electronic transmission, but if that fails, Form EC80 will be used, they should vote. That's why we had 55 people voting for it. And then he reframed it for the other side, that for those who want electronic transmission, but if it doesn't work, the election should end there. They should then vote as well. That's why we had 55 people voting, senators rather. So I want you to, I know you've probably monitored elections. You've probably been there during that whole process from the polling unit when the Form EC80 is collated and it's taken to the Ward Collation Center. What the provision says is meant to be taken there with Form EC80. Sorry, the BVAS is meant to be taken to the Ward Collation Center with Form EC80. But before that, the polling officer, the presiding officer, should have taken a picture of Form EC80 with BVAS for upload to IREV. So with this new provision now, with the proviso, have you tried to envision what would happen on election day with this proviso? I want us to begin to picture that and explain to Nigerians.
Yeah. I mean, with that proviso, it is clear to you to know that there will be insufficient network. And the basic thing that will happen is that we will then go back to using the Form EC8A form as the primary source of evidence when the case of elections finally head to the court. So once you see that proviso, you could listen to the former INEC reg, Dr. Mike Igini, who came on air and explained it to Nigerians. That proviso only serves the interest of persons in government who know that their only hope and guarantee is through election rigging. Mr. Kayode, INEC has made it clear that as far back as 2019 and 2020, from a technical committee that was set up between INEC and the NCC, they have implemented electronic transmission of result to as far as 96% across the country. If INEC has received more than 870 billion and says 200 billion is for electronic technology, why is it that INEC cannot even enter a partnership with Starlink? What will it cost to have technology across the 177,000 polling units? So instead of lawmakers to say, look, you have been able to achieve 96%, what is the other 4%? How can we strengthen it? A mischievous parliament will now go back to say, let us go back to the Form EC8A form. And guess what you will see as the result? You can take a look at Obiakpo local government. You can see the kind of result and mutilation, because the ground and the shrine of INEC election rigging is in the collation centers.
Peter,
and that is why Nigerians are insisting that let the results transmitted be evidence.
So quickly, and I want us to break this down so we are able to properly envision it. So at every polling unit, you have a party agent, right? So you have an agent for the APC, PDP, ADC, Labour Party, and the rest. And their job is and their job is quite simple: to ensure that they monitor the process, that the votes that are tallied for my party are the votes that my party really got when they were counting the votes, right? Now, these same agents are meant to move also to the Ward Collation Center to ensure that it is what happened at the polling unit that is happening at the Ward Collation Center. That's one. Two, we have voters in those polling units as well who usually stay behind and say, okay, you have to snap this thing and upload before you go. So are you saying that if peradventure they want to rig the election, what happens to these polling unit, these agents, these party agents? Aren't they there to ensure that this doesn't happen? Even the voters themselves, who are meant to mandate and say you have to snap this, are you saying that they also may fail in their duty to properly police that process?
Let us just be clear that all of what you have explained were part of the consideration of INEC when Mahmoud Yakubu wrote the INEC position paper 21. and said, in the light of all of the issues that happened between polling units, collation centers, and finally the National Collation Center, we need to reduce human interference as much as possible. You have seen cases with recorded voice notes of how governors of states went to capture collation centers where party agents were manhandled. Some persons even disappeared even till date, where security and law enforcement officials were used in collation centers, and at the end, the Form EC8A forms that were seen were different. That is why INEC in its own wisdom said, to reduce human interference, let what comes from the polling unit be transmitted in real time at that point to a central server where everybody has access to, so that between there and whatever later transpires, the results that everybody has countersigned, the presiding officer has also stamped on, becomes the evidence that will be admissible. Because Nigeria as it is today, there are strong men who have powers to envisage and to usurp whatever that happens within the system. And that is what gives credibility or gives strength to persons in the ruling party, where people can go as governors with personal security to collation centers and twist the entire process. Nigerians are saying INEC has done a feasibility study. INEC has set a record with their position paper. We want to reduce human interference from the process between voter registration, voting, and transmission. Let the results be transmitted in real time to a central place where everybody has access to, and not where people who are desperate for power can begin to undermine the process. I do not think that that is ambiguous. And anybody who is still saying that we must resort back to that from EC8A form, if you have done a certain thing for long and it has ended up in little or more and more unfortunate incidents, repeating the same thing and expecting a different result, would that not be insanity? We must understand the peculiarities of our elections, and that is why the Senate and the National Assembly must be insisting that to bring transparency and accountability, let this process be seen to be more transparent. What do we do to ensure that it is verified by Nigerians and seen to know that there is transparency? Anything other than that is a backdoor and a surreptitious attempt to steal the mandate of the people.
Ms. Aka, the biggest challenge, I was just looking at the big picture, why these issues, and the big picture is lack of trust in our institution. If INEC was a trusted agency, I don't think all of this will happen. That's why I'm telling you, lead the campaign around fixing INEC as an institution. So there's a crisis of confidence here in INEC, in the judiciary, and all of that. Before I ask my question, let me run through a few data. So as a 2023 presidential election, now people are really paying attention to the presidential election, which is very important. So there's expected to be greater vigilance when it comes to presidential election. The subnational is where the bigger shenanigans usually happen. So let's talk about the presidential election and some of the things I want to ask you. From the record of INEC IREV, I checked out yesterday, total of 176,846 polling units. Uploaded results in that election for presidential poll was 167,443 results, not uploaded about 9,403. So total uploaded results, whenever they finally came to about 94%. So we had just about 6% of election results not uploaded. And then, there's a Form EC40G that has to do with when elections are cancelled or elections don't hold, that can override whatever has been perhaps published as Form EC8A because of what had happened.
Because I would have been a dead man by now. My colleague in Kano was killed. The family wiped out because we wanted to do the right thing for our country. But today, the value pyramid of Nigeria is upside down. If you have bags, you can do well in our country. So that's the reason why I switched off. But as I noted somewhere, there comes a time, no matter what, we have no other country other than Nigeria. I would have left when I was in the university, but I stayed back because I wanted a country for us, despite being locked up by Abacha, kept everywhere, and all that. And so, having done all of that, to find out what we are going through is the reason why I switched off. Therefore, your question as to the statement I issued, history is a graveyard for contending opinions. What I put out there is an empirical evidence of how they have suffered. Because the resistance against a credible election in Nigeria has been long-standing. Dr. Gobadia was the first to set up the ICT unit in the INEC. It was a unit in his office and later a full department. At that time, they used the OMIR to try to sanitize the process. From there to Iwu's era, where you have to use DDC, machine capture machine. Iwu set up the VSAT across 774 local governments for transmission of results for the 2007 election. It was sabotage. All the billions that were spent wasted. Jega era came in. We started and we identified all election rigging processes and that the EV system must be carried out. The EVs has 4 tracks: the biometric registration, biometric accreditation, e-voting, and e-transmission. But as we were doing that, the members of the National Assembly, under Section 52, they were scared and they prohibited the use of any electronic thing. In fact, they used the word no electronic voting machine. That was the language that was used. But we came in, we saw Section 49, Section 52, Section 68 are the clear election rigging provisions. And for 20 years, we fought to get those provisions removed. Now, having done that, by the time Jega came in, we started with what you call biometric registration, with the first time that was carried out. Then you remember that we call TVC, temporary voters card. From TVC, we moved to PVC. From PVC, we moved to smart card reader. To deal with Section 49, which is the election rigging provision in our laws. All right? We did to deal with that. But what happened? By 2015, of course, sabotage from within and from out was a major problem. In 2015, by the time we brought the card reader was not a voting machine. Card reader was meant to deal with Section 49 that says that a presiding officer, once you are a voter who's registered in a polling unit, once you come, if he is satisfied, it should be given what he called a ballot to vote. That was where politicians started buying voters' cards, warehousing everything, rigging election. We needed to sanitize it. That was why we brought the idea of the smart card reader to identify, confirm, and authenticate a true voter at the polling unit. But what happened when the matter went to court? The apex court of our fatherland painfully declared that, the smart card reader, beautiful device, however, it should have been written in the Electoral Act. Today, the debate that has held this country down for the past 2 months or thereabout is brought about by the Supreme Court of our fatherland. And I'll give you what the Supreme Court did, how it has thrown everything in disarray. Supreme Court tribunals declared that the regulation and guideline of INEC that stated clearly on the basis of our historical experience that where the results that have been declared at the polling unit that expected or mandated to be sent to the IREB, so that when the result is already on the IREB, nobody will change it. Supreme Court said that IREB is an amusement center. It's a viewing center. It's of no effect and all that. Now, the question now is, what happened to the lineup of authorities, 1979, 1983, and all subsequent judgment of the court, Supreme Court, up to 2015, when the court declared that in any elections, there are 3 principal legal frameworks that govern election, which are the Constitution, the Electoral Act, and indeed regulations and guidelines made pursuant to the powers given both in the Constitution under Section 160 as well as Section 148 to make rules for the conduct of election. It should be noted.
Okay. I want to come in here. Thank you for all of this you have said. See, as a patriot, the truth has to be said. The horse has bolted away from the stable. We know that those that supported card reader and they called for electronic votings are the ones against it today because it's not going to benefit them. But we know how they spoke to you, supported card reader and all of that. So they have gotten what they want. As we speak today, what's on the IRF is not justiciable. Can you tell us some secrets of rigging so that people can be aware going up to the elections and what people should do as we speak? The matter is already gone. This house we have, they can't be trusted. They are rubber stamped. They've already passed what they want to pass. It is us Nigerians that remain now, those that still have the interest of the country at that. Point out the areas they might likely use to rig with the law that is on ground and how Nigerians can be aware.
Yes, why pointing that? Because actually it becomes this whole engagement. But the fact that I have accepted this invite,
we have to. You will not relent.
I see this as a mere academic. But let me quickly say this here. And that is that for 10 years, particularly from the Jega leadership up to Mahmoud Yakubu, so much effort was done for e-transmission. There was the INEC NCC report on electronic transmission, which was ready as at 2018. Remember that under the Buhari administration, regrettably, a government that came in through the risk that most of us took, they refused to have amendment to the act. It was only in 2019 that there was no electoral act to amend all the issues we identified in the 2015 election. What was the reason given? Was that ECOWAS required that 6 months to a process they commenced in 2016. Eventually, there was no electoral act in the conduct of 2019 election. Now, when the debate with respect to the 2022 electoral act, don't forget that Buhari regime rejected all the bill 4 times.
Yes.
Rejected it. Those around the president ensured that it was not done. But there's no book of remembrance in our country. If not for those of us who did the right thing in 2015, those in power in 2015, they will not be there today.
Yes.
But the moment they came in,
they
eliminated everybody that was named, all the director and all of that. Yeah. That is what happened. So now, when we in 2021, when the debate came up, the debate was premised on 2 grounds: that INEC was not ready, and that there was no national infrastructure. When that debate was going on in 2021, in respect to the 2022 Electoral Amendment Bill Act, INEC was never invited. And I addressed the press conference, and I said, why is it that we are behaving like some of the group of people I saw in America? They discuss about the right of abortion of women, but women are not part of it. Do men get pregnant? Why is it that those who are not conducting election are the ones saying INEC is not ready? That led to a statement issued by the commission to the effect that the commission had carried out 10 years of piloting. As a matter of fact, as a commissioner in Cross River State, Leah Imoke's second term election was conducted, and we pioneered the first under Jega leadership. The transmission of results from the ward in the 18 local government, like your studio here, I sat in my office and I was seeing the result, and they were updating from each of the ward local government. So because of time,
all the arguments don't make it. We know they are lying already. We've debunked all the arguments long ago. It has been passed. So how can we, the areas they are going to use to rig, tell Nigerians? All those arguments, we've made it in the past. We know they are.
The consequence, the danger of what has been passed is that we are bringing back what we call incident form. This is another version of incident form.
Yes.
Because there will be no network. History is a graveyard for contending opinions. When we introduced Carida, we decided to have an application for those who don't have fingers. So that we are looking for all-inclusive electoral process. Yeah. But you know what happened? Politicians connive with INEC full staff. That application for only those who don't have fingers was now used to use incident form. The whole of community no longer have fingers and all of that. You see, discretionary power can be abused. The danger of what is going to happen in 2027 as follows. At the polling units, presiding officers' lives are going to be in danger. Because where Nigerians are gathered, results of polling have been announced. Everyone could look at his telephone and you could see network. But the presiding officer says that there's no network. You are going to put the life of that presiding officer in danger. Meanwhile, the children of all the political elites are not going to be at the polling unit. It's the youth corpus that they are going to be faced with. This is a clear danger.
Okay, so
with respect to that, so what they are going to do now is like an incident form. Another version of incident form, which for you to sabotage the entire.
Another one. Can we do another one so that we be revealing all the secret to the people?
I don't think every of these things I would like to say here.
Let's say it. That's why people will hear it.
First, one of the danger of what they are trying to do is this. You know that in 2015, in 2019, there were evidence of collusion of some of our staff when they gave the serial number of EC8A in certain polling units for people to print. So when you now have what do you call it from EC8A that have the same serial number and the essential feature, and they are transmitted to the IRF, which one are you going to pick?
So they are going to
print ECA. Yes, because when INEC went to court to charge, some of the people came to the Senate, one or two persons, it was a common knowledge, came to the Senate. They produced INEC results.
The benefit of hindsight to know how the persons who got there in the first place, the 2023 elections, and how we spend billions of naira.
A fake result produced by, even when INEC distant, it said that this is not our original copy of
so I see that, Mr. Ken, and thank you so much. It's not just the legislature, because now you've also looked at even the judiciary. And even in the case where you came out to give evidence, they still ruled in favor of a result that was not produced by INEC. So even though the legislature is in the eye of the storm currently, it is across the three tiers of government: executive, legislature, and judiciary, in terms of how badly how our elections have been run and how credible they are. What is the way out? Because I don't want to leave people feeling despondent or increasing voter apathy.
The 2023 elections and how we spend billions of naira.
That sense of a light, despite how dark the tunnel is. So what is the way out? And maybe that's why Rufai was asking the question around where are some of the errors still now, because no matter how bad it seems, there are still people who are willing to go all the way in defense of democracy. What are the options available?
The greatest option that we have is the judiciary that must stand tall and mighty in defense of democracy and the rule of law. The 2022 Electoral Act, there are profound provisions that we put in there, or even unknown to politics. If you record that in one of our program, I used to tell you people there are provisions I don't want to mention on the program.
Those ones. Don't tell the politicians. Let's not tell them.
I say this because were it not for the judiciary, we would not be where we are today. This debate was because of judiciary. Transfer, transmit. Section 60, subsection 5, that says it must be done in accordance to the mode prescribed by INEC. Paragraph 38 of the regulation and guideline actually prescribe that mode. Let me say this here. How do we go forward? One of the things you must remember about the military, despite all the things that we fought military, it was the decision of the military that if election is, there was a decree that if election is bad, is rigged, it should not be the court that should confer victory on anybody, that should go back to the people to be sure of the will of the people. But what we have found in our country, historically, the judiciary had never been on the side of the electorate in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. As we saw what happened in June 12th, and everything that has happened so far, judiciary had never been. And I say this here. Democracy is a danger. When judiciary shows sign of weakness, collapse, or irrelevance, the only reason why we fought the military, talking about importance of judiciary here, is because there was no parliament. The people have no say. Otherwise, there was an executive, there was judiciary. As we saw what happened in June 12 was parliament. And everything that has happened so far, judiciary had never been. Democracy. And I say this here. How do you explain that in National Assembly democracy is a danger? Out public hearing when judiciary shows sign of weakness, collapse, what has happened, or irrelevance, no longer listen to the FACON. The only reason is what, Professor, why we fought one of your own, the military, John Frisk, talking about the importance of judiciary here. There's a because between what the people want, there was no parliament, and the people given have no. So judiciary is the greatest challenge. Democracy is a danger. They are public hearing when judiciary shows sign of weakness. Collapse, what has happened, or irrelevance, no longer listen to the FACON. The only reason is what judiciary have done. Why we fought one of your own, the military, John Frisk. Now talking about the importance of judiciary here. There's because between what the people want, there was no parliament, and the people given have no. So judiciary primary is the greatest. Nobody should think about any primary in Nigeria, because Supreme Court struck down the practice direction that was issued in line with Section 29 of the Act. Okay. Today, no primary in Nigeria. So the way forward is for the judiciary to stand tall and mighty in defense of due process, because what we are saying now is not what is expected. Okay,
Dr. Abati has a question.
Beginning, if I may come in here. Now, number one, you've written a lot about turnover and all of that. Some people have said it's scaremongering. I don't know whether you have received that reaction. People are saying, in any case, if 70% or 80% of the current members of the National Assembly don't come back, Nigerians will even celebrate. So turnover in the National Assembly should not be an issue. And in any case, the lawmakers have demonstrated with the drama yesterday that they really don't care one way or the other. You've talked about dangers. Now, as a patriot who still believes in this country, two suggestions. Some people have said you should write a book because you seem to know so much about our electoral process. But more importantly, what are your recommendations beyond what has happened with the Electoral Act Amendment Bill? What are your recommendations? You've talked about the role of the judiciary. How about the security agencies? How about, the media? How about civil society generally? Without